She walked into the cafe with her usual aura of confidence, the kind that came from years of running a successful company while raising her daughter on her own. The place smelled of roasted coffee beans and freshly baked pastries, and the twinkling lights hanging across the ceiling gave it a warm, cozy feel. She had agreed to this blind date reluctantly, convinced it would be yet another meeting with a wealthy man who talked too much about himself and too little about anything that truly mattered. Her best friend had insisted she give it a chance, saying she deserved companionship beyond her office walls. Adjusting her blazer and taking her daughter's hand, she scanned the room for someone who looked like he belonged to her world. Sharp suit, polished shoes, maybe even a luxury watch peeking from under his sleeve. Instead, her eyes landed on a man who looked nothing like what she expected. He sat at a corner table, tall and broad-shouldered, but dressed in a plain shirt rolled up at the sleeves, jeans slightly worn, and a jacket that had seen better days. His posture wasn't arrogant or rehearsed like the men she was used to. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, as though making himself smaller in the crowded cafe. There was no sleek briefcase beside him, no gleaming smartphone resting on the table, only a single cup of coffee and hands that looked like they had known hard work. For a moment she froze, her instinct urging her to turn around and leave before anyone noticed. This couldn't be her date. There must have been some mistake. But then his eyes lifted to hers. They weren't filled with calculation or judgment. They held a quiet sincerity, almost as though he was just as nervous about being there as she was. He stood up quickly, almost awkwardly, and gave a small smile that seemed completely unpracticed. That simple, genuine smile disarmed her more than she cared to admit. Her daughter tugged at her hand, whispering, "Is that him, Mommy?" The little girl's innocent curiosity pushed her a step forward before she could second-guess herself. As she approached, she told herself she would sit down for 5 minutes out of courtesy, maybe have a coffee, and then politely excuse herself. But when she sat across from him, something shifted. He didn't greet her with a boast about his career or an overly rehearsed compliment. Instead, he said softly, "I wasn't sure you'd show up. Thank you for coming." His voice carried humility, not entitlement, and it struck her as strangely refreshing. For the first time in years, she felt like she wasn't walking into a business meeting disguised as a date. She was simply meeting another human being, one who wasn't trying to impress her with wealth or status. And though she couldn't explain why, she stayed. She had expected the conversation to be awkward, maybe even unbearable, but as soon as they began to talk, something unusual happened. He didn't start with the predictable questions she was so used to, about her company, her wealth, or her lifestyle. Instead, he asked about her day, about whether her daughter liked hot chocolate, and what hobbies they enjoyed together. At first, she thought he was avoiding serious topics because he didn't know how to carry a conversation, but as the minutes passed, she realized he was genuinely interested. His questions weren't surface level. He actually listened to the answers. When she mentioned her daughter loved painting, his eyes lit up, and he shared how his late mother used to paint murals in their old neighborhood, telling the story with such detail that even her daughter leaned forward, fascinated. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't being measured by her title or her bank account. He spoke openly about himself, too, though not in the polished, bragging way the men in her world did. He admitted he worked as a janitor at a local school, and instead of shrinking with shame, he explained it with quiet pride. He said it wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and it paid the bills. She noticed the roughness of his hands when he wrapped them around his coffee cup and realized those weren't the hands of someone who had spent his life shaking hands in boardrooms. They were the hands of someone who worked hard every single day to survive. She found herself oddly moved. She expected him to be intimidated by her career, but he wasn't. Instead, he asked her how she managed to balance work and motherhood, and when she explained the sleepless nights, the constant pressure, and the loneliness that came with being a single mom in a man's world, he didn't dismiss it or try to fix it. He just listened. Really listened. That simple act made her feel lighter than she had in years. Her daughter, meanwhile, had completely warmed up to him. At one point, she shyly offered him a cookie from her plate, and he accepted it with exaggerated delight, making the little girl laugh so hard she nearly spilled her drink. Watching the two of them, the single mom felt something unexpected stir inside her, an ease she had long forgotten. The contrast to her usual dates was striking. Normally, men would compete with her, try to impress her, or subtly remind her that her success made them uncomfortable. But this man didn't seem to care about any of that. He spoke about his struggles candidly, how he had once dreamed of being a teacher but life's hardships had forced him into a different path, how he still read books every night to keep learning, how he believed dignity wasn't about what job you had but how you did it. His words weren't rehearsed. They came from a place of raw honesty that shook her carefully built walls. For years, she had thought love would come from someone powerful, someone who matched her status, but as she looked at the janitor sitting across from her, laughing with her daughter, speaking with humility, she realized that maybe love had nothing to do with status at all. As the afternoon drifted on, she realized something extraordinary was happening. What had begun as a simple blind date she nearly walked away from was slowly transforming into a moment she would never forget. The man sitting across from her didn't come with fancy credentials or the trappings of wealth, yet he had managed to touch her heart in a way no one else had. She had built her life around walls of protection, walls made of success, responsibility, and a constant determination to prove she didn't need anyone. But here was someone who wasn't trying to climb those walls or tear them down. He simply sat with her, steady and genuine, showing her that she didn't need to pretend or perform to be valued. Her daughter's laughter rang out again as he folded a napkin into a clumsy little bird, holding it up like it was the most magical creation. The little girl clapped her hands with delight, her eyes sparkling in a way the mother hadn't seen in a long time. It was then she realized the depth of what was unfolding. This wasn't just about her, it was about her daughter too. Every man she had dated before had either ignored her child or treated her like an inconvenience. But this man, who had no wealth or status to boast of, gave her daughter his full attention, treating her like the most important person in the room. That single act revealed more about his character than any words ever could. She had always believed that love, if it ever came again, would have to fit neatly into her world of boardrooms and balance sheets. Yet what she was discovering now was that love didn't care about titles or net worth. Love revealed itself in laughter, in the quiet comfort of being heard, in the way her daughter felt safe and happy in his presence. She found herself staring at him longer than she intended, noticing the small details, the way his eyes softened when he smiled, the way he spoke with respect rather than arrogance, the way he carried himself with dignity even though society might overlook him. And against her better judgment, she felt herself drawn to him in a way that defied logic. By the time their cups were empty and the café began to thin out, she knew something inside her had changed. She had spent years chasing after the wrong kind of love, convinced that only someone as powerful as she was could truly stand beside her. But sitting here with a janitor who had nothing but honesty to offer, she realized she had found something far more valuable than wealth or prestige. She had found a man who treated her and her daughter with kindness, respect, and sincerity. And for the first time in years, she felt hope blossom in her heart. Love, she understood now, was not about matching status or wealth. It was about finding someone who saw you for who you truly were and chose you anyway.